The blue light from the alien control panel cast strange shadows across Susan Reyes' face as she worked. Her fingers moved with practiced skill over the unfamiliar symbols and glowing interfaces. Unlike most humans, she understood the Mezari technology. Not completely, but enough to be dangerous, as her old instructor used to say. Susan had been on the alien ship for 3 days now, ever since the Mezari had appeared in Earth's orbit with their massive vessels and incomprehensible demands. Humanity had sent its best and brightest to make contact, scientists, diplomats, military leaders. But the Mezari had chosen Susan, a mid-level translator from a small government office. No one understood why, least of all Susan herself. The Mezari were tall, elegant, beings with iridescent skin that seemed to shift color with their moods. Their eyes, large and entirely black, held an intelligence that made even the bravest humans uncomfortable. They moved with a fluid grace that suggested their bones, if they had any, were nothing like human ones. Mizora, the alien who seemed to be in charge, approached Susan now, her skin rippling with patterns of deep purple and blue. The translator in Susan's ear caught the complex harmonics of the alien language. "You work quickly for a human." Mizora observed her voice melodic despite the translator's flat rendering. "Have you found what we seek?" Susan straightened her back, aching from hours hunched over the alien console. "Not yet," she admitted. "But I understand more of your navigation system. Now I think what you're looking for might be in a different database." The truth was, Susan had already found exactly what the Mezari wanted. Coordinates to a system they called Viridian, which apparently contained something of immense value to them. But something felt wrong about the whole situation. The way the aliens had insisted on her specifically. The way they kept the other human representatives isolated. The strange gaps in their explanation of why they needed Earth's help at all. Susan had spent her career finding patterns in language. Now she was finding patterns in behavior. And those patterns suggested the Mezari were hiding something important. Mizora tilted her head in that unsettling alien way. "So slow, your species. Yet you were chosen." I wonder if that was wise. The words sent a chill through Susan. Chosen? By whom, for what? The Mezari spoke as if some other force had selected her, but they had been the ones to demand her presence. She was about to ask when. Alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Lights pulsed from blue to angry red. Mizora stiffened her skin. "Flashing patterns of alarm. We are under attack," she said. "All non-essential personnel to safety chambers." Susan found herself being herded along, with several other humans down a twisting corridor. The ship's wall seemed almost alive, pulsing with light and information displays tracking whatever was happening outside. The few glimpses Susan caught showed smaller vessels surrounding the main Mezari ship firing weapons that left trails of green fire in the vacuum of space. The safety chamber turned out to be a spherical room with curved seating along the walls. Susan recognized several of the other humans, diplomats and scientists mostly, all looking confused and frightened. "What is happening?" asked Dr. Patel, a physicist from India, clutching her tablet computer to her chest like a shield. "Who would attack a Mezari vessel?" "No one who wants to live long," said Colonel Harper, a military observer from the United States Space Force. His hand kept moving to his hip where a sidearm would normally be, but the Mezari had allowed no weapons aboard. Susan found a seat near a curved wall display that was showing exterior views of the battle. The attacking ships were sleek and dark with designs that matched no known human craft. But they weren't Mezari either. "They're Krexar," said a quiet voice beside her. Susan turned to find another Mezari standing there. This one smaller than Mizora, with skin patterns. In gentle greens and blues, she hadn't noticed any Mezari entering the safety chamber. "Who are the Krexar?" Susan asked. "And who are you?" "I am Ilara," the Mezari said. "My role would translate to something like historian in your language. The Krexar are old enemies of my people. They have hunted us across 12 star systems." Susan processed this new information. The Mezari had told Earth nothing about being in a war, nothing about enemies called Krexar. They had presented themselves as peaceful explorers, interested in cultural exchange. "Why didn't your people tell us about this when you came to Earth?" she asked carefully. Ilara's eyes shifted toward the floor in what Susan had come to recognize as a gesture of discomfort, or perhaps shame. "We feared you would not help us if you knew the Krexar are powerful and merciless. Many species choose not to involve themselves." The ship shuddered violently around them. Several humans cried out in alarm. The display showed one of the Mezari defensive weapons had been destroyed. The attacking Krexar ships were moving in closer. Susan studied Ilara carefully. There was something different about this Mezari. Her manner, her speech patterns, even the way she held herself seemed less formal, more open than the others Susan had met. "What do the Krexar want?" she asked. "Why are they hunting your people?" Ilara's skin rippled with dark patterns. "We possess something they desire. Something we have kept safe for many generations. Something we hope to hide in your solar system." The truth hit Susan with stunning clarity. "You came to Earth looking for a place to hide this thing. Whatever it is, it's why you needed our star charts and navigation help. You wanted to hide it somewhere in our system where the Krexar wouldn't find it." Ilara made a sound that might have been a sigh. "We needed a human who could understand our systems quickly. Someone who could help us interface with Earth technology without asking too many questions. Someone not important enough to be missed if things went wrong." The casual cruelty of the statement left Susan momentarily speechless. She wasn't important enough to be missed. The Mezari had evaluated all of humanity and determined she was skilled enough to be useful but expendable before she could respond. The ship rocked with another impact much stronger than before. The lights flickered and gravity seemed to falter momentarily. Several humans floated inches off their seats before crashing back down. "The Krexar have breached our outer hull," Ilara said, her skin now pulsing with rapid patterns of alarm. "They will board us soon." Colonel Harper moved closer to them. "What exactly are these Krexar? What do they look like? What weapons do they use?" Ilara turned her large black eyes toward him. "They are not like us or you. They evolved from apex predators on a world of constant twilight. They hunt by sound and movement. They will kill anyone who resists and capture those who surrender." "That doesn't answer my question," Harper insisted. "What are we dealing with?" Susan watched the fear ripple across Ilara's skin. The Mezari were clearly terrified of these Krexar. Whatever was coming was worse than she'd imagined. A new alarm sounded different from the others, more urgent. Ilara stiffened. "They have boarded," she whispered. "They are in the ship." The door to the safety chamber sealed with a hiss. Displays around the room shifted to interior views of the ship. Susan watched in growing horror as creatures moved through the corridors, tall, muscular beings with gray skin and elongated limbs. They moved with predatory grace, their faces hidden behind breathing apparatus or perhaps battle masks. Each carried weapons that looked like they had grown organically from their arms. "The Krexar," Ilara confirmed. "They will search the ship until they find what they seek, or until they find us." Susan thought, watching the aliens methodically clearing each section of the ship. She turned to Ilara. "What is it they want? What could possibly be worth all this?" Ilara hesitated, her skin shifting through patterns of indecision. Before she could answer, the ship rocked with another massive impact. The lights failed completely, plunging the safety chamber into darkness. Screams echoed from the humans around her when emergency lighting came on seconds later, casting everything in a dull red glow. Susan saw that part of the ceiling had collapsed. Several people were injured. The display screens were dead. "We need to move," Ilara said urgently. "This chamber is compromised. They will find us soon." "But where can we go?" Colonel Harper demanded. "We're on a ship in space surrounded by hostile aliens." Ilara moved to a section of wall that looked no different from any other. To Susan's surprise, it slid open, revealing a narrow passage. "The service corridors," she explained. "They run throughout the ship. We can use them to reach the escape pods." Susan looked at the injured people around them. "We can't leave them." Ilara's skin pulsed with patterns Susan couldn't interpret. "The Krexar will not harm unresisting prisoners." Not immediately, we can do more good by escaping. Now we must hurry. Susan hesitated, torn between staying with the injured and following Alara, who seemed to offer the only chance of survival. The decision was made for her when Colonel Harper pushed past them into the passage ill. Go first, he said. Military training. We need to know what safe. Susan helped Dr. Patil to her feet. The Indian scientist was shaking, but determined. I didn't come this far to die on an alien ship, she said with surprising steel in her voice. One by one, a small group of humans followed Alara into the passage. Susan was the last to enter, casting a final glance at those left behind, mostly injured or too frightened to move. She silently promised to find a way to help them if she survived, as the wall sealed behind them. Susan realized she was now committed to a path she barely understood. Running from aliens she had just learned existed, following a Mazzari who had admitted her people had chosen Susan because she was expendable. The narrow service corridor stretched ahead, lit by strips of emergency lighting. The sounds of the ship under attack were muffled here, but the group moved faster through the narrow service corridors of the Mazzari ship. Susan could hear the sounds of pursuit growing closer. The Krexar hunters were gaining on them. Their strange rhythmic footsteps echoed through the metal passages, creating an eerie drumbeat that matched her racing heart. Alara suddenly stopped at a junction, her skin pulsing with rapid patterns of blues and purples. We must separate, she said. The Krexar hunt better when tracking a single group. Colonel, take 3 others, and go left. At the third cross passage, turn right. It will lead to the secondary escape pod. Bay Harper nodded grimly, selecting Dr. Patil and 2 others to go with him. The rest of you with the alien, he said, then fixed Susan with a hard stare. Stay alive, Reyes. If any of us make it back to Earth, they need to know what happened here. Susan nodded, watching as Harper led his group down the left passage. They disappeared around a bend, the sound of their movement fading. The pursuing footsteps seemed to hesitate, then split as well. Some following Harper, others still coming toward them. Alara led Susan and the remaining 3 humans, a climatologist named Beth, a communications specialist called Roy, and a young diplomat named Carla, through a series of increasingly narrow passages. The walls here were different, less finished, with exposed circuitry and pulsing organic-looking components that reminded Susan uncomfortably of blood vessels. The Mazzari ships are partially grown, Alara explained, noticing Susan's gaze. These service areas contain the living systems that maintain the vessel living. Susan repeated. The ship is alive. Not alive as you understand it, Alara said. But not simply machinery either. It is somewhere between. The concept does not translate. Well, they reached a small circular chamber with several closed panels around the walls. Alara moved to one, pressing her palm against its surface. The panel slid open, revealing a small space barely large enough for 2 humans. This is not an escape, pod, Susan said, looking at the cramped compartment. No, Alara agreed, it is a maintenance access point, but it will hide you from Krexar sensors long enough for me to reach the primary systems core, where I can activate security protocols that may drive them from the ship. Susan frowned. Why can't we all go to this systems core? Alara's skin rippled with what might have been impatience. The core recognizes only Mazzari. It would kill any human who entered, and I cannot activate the protocols remotely. The Krexar have blocked our normal command systems. The sound of pursuit was growing louder. They had perhaps minutes before the hunters found them. It's a trap, Beth the climatologist said, suddenly backing away from the compartment. She's separating us to make us easier to capture. Alara turned her large black eyes toward the woman. I understand your suspicion, but if I wanted to betray you to the Krexar, I could have done so already. They are hunting me as surely as they hunt you. Susan studied the alien, trying to read the patterns flowing across her iridescent skin. The Mazzari had already admitted to bringing humans aboard under false pretenses to choosing Susan because she was expendable. But something in Alara's manner seemed genuine. Her fear was real. That much Susan was certain of. I believe her, Susan said, making her decision quickly. We need to trust someone, and right now our options are limited. Roy and Carla looked uncertain, but the approaching sounds of the Krexar made the decision. For them. All three humans crowded into the small compartment. Alara reached for the panel to close it. "Wait," Susan said, catching the alien's wrist, surprised by the cool, silky texture of the skin. "What is it?" "The Krexar are hunting." "What are they looking for?" Alara's skin rippled with dark patterns. "The Genesis seed," she said. "It is the last of its kind, the final hope for a world the Krexar destroyed. Now I must go. The hunters are nearly here." Before Susan could ask anything more, the panel slid shut, plunging them into near darkness. Only a faint blue glow from something in the ceiling provided any light. The space was cramped with 4 adult humans pressed together. Susan could feel Roy's rapid breathing against her shoulder, Carla's trembling arm against her side. "What the hell is a Genesis seed?" Roy whispered. "Something worth dying for, apparently." Beth replied, her voice tight with fear. They fell silent as the sounds of pursuit grew louder, then stopped right outside their hiding place. Susan held her breath. The panel that concealed them was thin. If the Krexar had sensors that could detect human life signs, they were finished. A series of clicking sounds came from outside, like mandibles or claws tapping against metal. Then a low, hissing voice spoke in a language Susan didn't recognize. The translator in her ear remained silent, either unable to process the Krexar language or simply not programmed for it. Long seconds passed. The clicking continued, occasionally punctuated by that strange, hissing speech. Susan felt sweat trickling down her back, her legs beginning to cramp in the confined space. Next to her, Carla was shaking silently, crying. Then suddenly the sounds moved away, the clicking and hissing growing fainter as the hunters continued down the passage. They had not been discovered, at least not yet. The 4 humans remained frozen in place, afraid to move, afraid even to breathe normally. No one spoke. The blue light continued to pulse gently overhead, casting strange shadows on their frightened faces. Susan tried to process everything she'd learned. The Mesari had come to Earth not for cultural exchange, but seeking a hiding place for something called a Genesis seed, the last of its kind, from a world the Krexar had destroyed. She thought about Alara's words, the final hope. Whatever this seed was, it had enough value that both species were willing to fight and die for it. Time passed impossible to track in their hidden compartment. Minutes, hours. Susan felt her body growing, stiff, her mouth dry with thirst. Beside her, Roy shifted, trying to find a more comfortable position. Carla had stopped crying, but her breathing remained uneven. Beth had closed her eyes, perhaps sleeping, or simply retreating into herself. A sudden scraping sound at the panel made them all freeze again. The panel slid open, revealing not a Krexar hunter but Alara. Her skin was now patterned with dark reds and blacks, what Susan had come to recognize as signs of injury or distress. "Come quickly," she said. "The Krexar have taken the bridge, but I have sealed the system's core. They cannot access it yet. We have a small window of opportunity." Susan climbed out first, her legs nearly buckling after being confined for so long. The others followed, each moving stiffly. The corridor outside showed signs of combat scoring along the walls from energy weapons, darker stains that might have been Mesari blood. "What happened to the others?" Susan asked Harper. "Dr. Patil." "I do not know," Alara admitted. "They may have reached the escape pods, or they may have been captured. We cannot help them now. We must reach the primary hangar bay. There is a shuttle there. One I have prepared." They moved through the damaged corridors, Alara leading the way. Her movements were different, now less fluid, suggesting injury. The ship around them seemed different too. The pulsing organic components in the walls were slower, dimmer. The ship itself was wounded. Twice they had to hide as Krexar patrols passed, pressed into recesses in the walls, hardly daring to breathe. Susan got her first clear look at their hunters, tall humanoid but with gray mottled skin and elongated limbs. Their faces were partially covered by breathing apparatus, but what was visible seemed reptilian with vertical pupils and yellow eyes. They moved with a predatory grace, their weapons integrated into their armor, seeming to grow from their forearms. The hangar bay, when they finally reached it, was vast, much larger than Susan had expected. Mizari shuttles lined the walls, sleek, organic-looking vessels that resembled nothing so much as giant seeds with their smooth, curved hulls. But standing between them and the shuttles were 3 Krexar hunters, their backs to the small group as they examined one of the vessels. "We cannot fight them," Ilara whispered. "They are too strong, too fast, their senses too acute. We need a distraction." Susan looked around the hangar bay, noticing the control panels near the massive doors that would open to space. There was something there, a possibility. "The hangar bay doors," she said quietly. "Can they be opened from that panel?" Ilara followed her gaze. "Yes, but the atmospheric force field would prevent decompression." "It is a safety feature," Susan thought quickly. "If we disable the force field first, then open the doors, the Krexar would be pulled towards space." Ilara realized, her skin brightening with understanding. "But so would we. We would need to secure ourselves first." Beth pointed to a storage area nearby, equipment lockers. Perhaps magnetic boots, emergency tethers. They needed to move quickly. The Krexar could turn and discover them at any moment. Susan and Roy crept to the storage lockers, finding what they needed. Magnetic boots that could be attached over their shoes, emergency. Cables with hooks designed to anchor to the ship's hull. Ilara, meanwhile, moved silently to the environmental controls, her long fingers working quickly over the alien interface. Susan watched as the Mizari deliberately sabotaged the atmospheric containment system. A warning light began to flash silently. "Now we need to reach the door controls," Susan said, looking at the distance they would need to cross at least 30 feet of open space with no cover. The Krexar would see them long before they reached. "I will do it," Ilara said. "I am faster." Before anyone could argue, the Mizari was moving, gliding across the hangar bay with astonishing speed. The Krexar noticed immediately. One let out a high-pitched shriek that hurt Susan's ears. All 3 turned, weapons raised, tracking Ilara's movement. "Secure yourselves now," Ilara shouted as she reached the door controls. They half-carried Ilara across the hangar bay to the shuttle. The Mizari was weakening with each step, dark fluid still seeping from her wounded side. Susan and Roy supported her between them, while Beth and Carla moved ahead, checking for any remaining Krexar. The shuttle was unlike anything Susan had seen before, shaped like a teardrop. Its surface shimmered with an iridescent quality similar to Mizari skin. The hull had no visible seams, no obvious entrance. Ilara placed her palm against the smooth surface. A section of the hull simply melted away, creating an opening large enough for them to enter. Inside the shuttle was a single open chamber with curved seating that seemed to grow from the floor. The walls pulsed with the same organic technology Susan had seen throughout the Mizari ship. "Place me there," Ilara said weakly, gesturing toward what appeared to be the pilot's position. A raised section of floor with a semicircle of flowing control surfaces. Susan and Roy helped the injured alien into position. The moment Ilara touched the controls, the shuttle came alive. Lights pulsing along the walls, displays appearing in midair, showing the hangar bay outside and the status of various ship systems. The text was in Mizari script, incomprehensible. "To the humans, I have preset the course," Ilara said, her voice growing fainter. "The shuttle will take us to safety." Susan frowned. "Where exactly are we going?" Ilara's skin rippled with patterns of pain. "To the place where the Genesis seed is hidden, where Mizora would never think to look." Before Susan could ask more questions, a new alarm sounded, lights flashing around the hangar bay. "They have breached the outer doors," Ilara said. "More Krexar are coming. We must launch now." The humans quickly found seats, securing themselves with harnesses that formed around their bodies. As soon as they were settled, the shuttle began to move, rising smoothly from the hangar floor and turning toward the massive doors. "The doors are closed," Beth pointed out. "How do we?" Her Question was answered when energy beams lanced from the front of the shuttle, striking the hangar doors. The metal glowed red, then white, then simply dissolved, creating an opening just large enough for the shuttle to pass through. The ship accelerated, rapidly shooting through the opening and into space beyond. Susan could see the massive Mesari mothership under attack. Krexar vessels swarming around it like angry insects, firing weapons that left burning trails across the hull. The shuttle banked, sharply moving away from the battle. The acceleration pressed Susan into her seat, making breathing difficult. Stars streaked past the viewports as they gained speed. "Where are we going?" Susan asked again when the pressure eased enough for her to speak. Ilara did not respond. Her skin was pulsing with slower, weaker patterns. The dark fluid from her wound had pooled beneath her. "She's dying," Roy said quietly. "We need to help her." But none of them knew how to treat a Mesari. The alien physiology was completely unknown to them. Susan moved closer to Ilara, kneeling beside her. "Ilara," she said gently, "what can we do? How can we help you?" The Mesari's large black eyes focused on Susan with apparent effort. "The coordinates," she whispered, "are set. The shuttle knows where to go. You must protect the seed. It is everything." Susan placed her hand on Ilara's arm, feeling the cool, silky texture of the alien's skin. "Tell me about the seed," she urged. "What is it? Why is it so important?" Ilara's skin rippled once more with complex patterns. "Our homeworld was destroyed by the Krexar," she said, each word seeming to cost her great effort. "Billions of lives, countless species, an entire ecosystem gone. But before the end, our scientists created the Genesis seed. It contains the genetic material of every living thing from our world, the complete biological record, and more. It contains the knowledge to regenerate, to rebuild." Susan understood now. This wasn't just a scientific specimen. It was an ark, a way to resurrect an entire planet, and all its life forms. The Krexar want to destroy it. Ilara continued. "Their philosophy, their religion demands it. They believe each species should rise or fall on its own merit, that extinction is natural and resurrection is abomination. How did you end up with it?" Susan asked, "Why you specifically?" "I was part of the team that created it," Ilara said. "One of the last ships to escape our world. The plan was to find a suitable planet to plant the seed, but the Krexar hunted us, destroyed our vessels, one by one, until only the mothership remained. With nowhere else to turn, we came to Earth. Human worlds are numerous, protected. The Krexar avoid direct confrontation with your kind. You are too many, too resourceful, too willing to fight." Susan processed this information. The Mesari had come to Earth looking for protection, using humanity as a shield against the Krexar, but they hadn't been honest about their intentions. Where is the seed now? She asked. Ilara's breathing had become labored, her skin patterns fading. "The ship will take you there," she said. "Then you must decide whether to protect it or destroy it. The choice belongs to humans, now." Susan felt the weight of those words settle on her shoulders. A responsibility she had never asked for. The fate of an entire world's biological heritage. "Ilara, I don't understand," she began, but stopped as she realized the Mesari's skin patterns had ceased entirely. The alien was dead. For a long moment, no one spoke. The shuttle continued its journey on autopilot, the displays showing their course through unfamiliar star systems. None of the humans knew how to control the vessel, even if they wanted to. They were committed to whatever destination Ilara had programmed. "What do we do now?" Beth asked, finally breaking. "The silence, we wait," Susan said. "We see where the shuttle takes us, then we make a decision about this Genesis." Roy moved to examine the control systems, running his hands over the smooth alien interfaces without effect. The shuttle ignored his attempts to interact with it. "How long do you think?" Carla asked, looking at the displays. "Do we have enough air? Enough food?" "The shuttle seems to be fully prepared," Ilara said. "It was Susan," replied. "She must have planned for this contingency. Stocked it for human needs. They searched the shuttle, finding compartments containing what appeared to be food and water. The food was strange, gelatinous cubes in various colors, but testing revealed they were edible if bland water was stored in flexible containers that conformed to their hands when lifted time passed. The shuttle continued its journey through space. None of them could accurately track the passage of time. Their watches showed Earth time, which had little meaning in deep space. They slept when tired, ate, when hungry, tried to maintain some semblance of routine. Susan spent hours studying the Mazzari displays, trying to understand the alien script, trying to guess their destination. From the star patterns, she could tell they were moving away from Earth, but beyond that she had no reference points. On what they guessed was the third day the shuttle changed course. The constant thrust they had become accustomed to ceased, leaving them in zero gravity for several disorienting minutes. Then, acceleration resumed, but in a different direction. "We're changing course," Roy observed, looking at the displays. "Something ahead of us." The main view screen shifted, showing their new destination. A small planetoid, or large asteroid, hanging in space. Its surface scarred and cratered, typical of airless bodies throughout the universe. But as they drew closer, Susan could see something unusual about it. Parts of the surface aren't natural, she said, pointing to regular geometric patterns visible on one hemisphere. "Those are structures. Someone built something there." The shuttle continued its approach, slowing as it neared the planetoid. A signal appeared to be transmitted, though none of them could understand it. A response came back, and the shuttle adjusted its course again, heading for what appeared to be a docking bay carved into the rocky surface. "This must be it," Beth said. "The place where the seed is hidden. But who built this base?" Carla wondered. "The Mazzari," maybe, Susan said. "But why hide something here in an abandoned base on a random asteroid?" "It's so obvious," Roy finished her thought. "If I were hiding something valuable, I'd put it somewhere. No one would think to look, not in a purpose-built facility." The shuttle entered the docking bay landing, with barely a tremor. The external view screens showed an enclosed space with airlocks and what appeared to be maintenance equipment, all apparently designed for Mazzari technology. "Do we just go out there?" Carla asked nervously. "What choice do we have?" Beth replied, "We're stuck on this shuttle otherwise, and our supplies won't last forever." Susan moved to where the entrance had formed when they first entered the shuttle, placing her hand against the hull as she'd seen Alara do. Nothing happened. The shuttle did not respond to her human touch. "Maybe it needs Mazzari biology to open," Roy suggested, looking at Alara's body with an expression of distaste. Before they could decide what to do, the hull simply melted away as it had before, creating an opening. To the docking bay beyond, atmosphere rushed in, confirming the bay was pressurized, breathable air according to the shuttle's displays. They all looked at each other, uncertainty in their expressions. "Someone knows we're here," Susan said, "and they just let us in with no better options." They exited the shuttle, Susan leading the way. The gravity was lighter than Earth, perhaps 40% normal, making their movements awkward until they adjusted. The air smelled strange, slightly metallic but breathable. The docking bay was clearly designed for Mazzari technology, curved organic-looking interfaces and pulsing lights similar to those on the mothership and shuttle. But there was something different here, something older. The facility had a worn, abandoned quality to it, as if it had been unused for a very long time. Susan stared at Mazzora, unable to process what she'd just heard. "My great-grandmother was Mazzari." "That's impossible," she said, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. "Humans and Mazzari are different species. We evolved on different worlds." Mazzora moved, closer, her skin shifting with patterns that somehow reminded Susan of a smile. "Not impossible," she said, "merely improbable. We have visited Earth before, Susan Reyes, many times throughout your history, sometimes remaining for years, decades, even studying, observing, and occasionally interacting. My great-grandmother was human." Susan insisted she was born in Mexico. "I have photographs. The appearance was human." "Yes." Mazzora agreed. "But the essence was Mazzari. One of our geneticists sent to study human evolution. She took human form to better understand your species. and in doing so formed an attachment to a human male, your great-grandfather. They produced a child, a hybrid, the first successful blending of our species. That child appeared fully human, but carried Mazari genetic markers dormant but present. Those markers have been passed down through your family line, diluted with each generation, but still there. Still potent. Susan felt dizzy, the implications overwhelming her. She reached out to steady herself against one of the crystalline columns. The cool surface seemed to pulse beneath her palm as if responding to her touch. She looked back at her companions. Their faces showed shock, disbelief, concern. Roy had moved protectively closer to Beth and Carla, all of them watching the exchange with wide eyes. "If what you're saying is true," Susan said, forcing her voice to remain steady, "why does it matter now? What does this have to do with the Genesis seed?" "With this place, everything," Mazora replied. "The tree responds to specific genetic sequences. It was programmed that way for security to prevent misuse. The Mazari genetic line that your great-grandmother belonged to was one of the few the tree would recognize as authorized caretakers. When our world was destroyed, when we lost so many of our people, we needed to find all possible authorized users, even those of mixed heritage." Like you, Susan looked at the massive tree, its bark continuing to shift and pulse with that strange internal light. So similar to Mazari skin. Suddenly a childhood memory surfaced, her grandmother showing her how to grow plants, telling her she had a special touch with living things. Plants always seemed to thrive under her care. Something her grandmother had said was in their blood. "This is why you brought humans to your ship," she realized. "Not just for navigation help or to hide the seed. You were looking for me specifically." Mazora inclined her head in what Susan had come to recognize as agreement. "We analyzed Earth's genetic databases searching for traces of our lost scientist. When we found markers in your family line, we arranged for you to be brought to us." The casual manipulation of her life made Susan angry. "You could have just asked," she said. "You didn't need to create an interstellar incident. You didn't need to put all these people in danger." Mazora's skin darkened. "Would you have believed us? If we had simply approached you on Earth, told you of your heritage, would any human authority have allowed you to come with us willingly?" She had a point. Susan had to admit she would have thought them insane. If aliens had landed and claimed she was part Mazari, she would have laughed or run or called for help. But still, Susan insisted. There must have been a better way than kidnapping me and risking all these lives. Lives were always at risk. Mazora said, "The Krexar have hunted the seed for decades. They would have found Earth eventually. Your world would have become a target regardless of our actions. At least this way we had a chance to secure the seed first." Susan turned to look at the tree again. The supposed Genesis seed. "So this is it. The biological record of your entire world. More than a record." Mazora corrected. "A blueprint, a template. Within its cellular structure, this organism contains the complete genetic code of every living thing from our homeworld. It can generate viable specimens of any species. It can recreate our ecosystems, our biological diversity, and more. Importantly, it contains our collective knowledge, our history, our science, our understanding of the universe. All encoded in its DNA." Susan tried to grasp the concept. A biological computer, a living ark, a genetic library, all in one organism. It seemed impossible. And yet the evidence stood before her, glowing with internal light. "The Krexar," Susan said, returning to the immediate threat. "They attacked your ship. They killed Ilara. They're still hunting you, hunting the seed. Why, what threat does this pose to them?" Mazora moved to one of the transparent containers, examining the strange creatures within. "The Krexar believe in what they call the natural order," she explained. "That species rise and fall according to universal laws. That extinction, once it occurs, should be permanent. To resurrect a lost species is to them an abomination, a violation of cosmic law. Their religion," Roy said from behind Susan, "their beliefs. Yes. Mizora agreed, though she seemed to find the concept strange. What you would call religion, though it is also their science, their philosophy. The Krexar do not separate these things as humans do. To them, the universe has an order, a pattern. To disrupt that pattern by resurrecting extinct species is the gravest sin. And now, you want our help? Susan said, Earth's help. To protect this thing, not just to protect it, Mizora corrected. To use it. The time has come. The seed is fully mature. It must be planted on a compatible world, allowed to grow, to spread, to fulfill its purpose. You want to plant it on Earth, Susan realized with sudden clarity. Mizora's skin pulsed with affirmation. It is the most compatible world we have found. The ecosystems are similar enough, the conditions favorable, and your presence. Susan Reyes confirms it. The seed recognizes you. It will respond to your command. Susan felt the weight of this revelation settle on her shoulders. An entire alien ecosystem introduced to Earth. What would that mean for Earth's native species? What conflicts might arise? What unintended consequences? No, she said firmly. No, I won't allow it. Earth has its own ecosystems, its own balance. You can't just introduce an entire alien biosphere and expect nothing to go wrong. The seed is adaptable. Mizora said its very purpose is integration, not competition. The Mizari life forms would complement Earth life, not replace it, and the knowledge contained within, the advances in medicine, agriculture, energy, all would benefit humanity. But you can't know that for certain, Susan argued. No one can predict exactly how two completely different evolutionary paths would interact when forced together. Mizora seemed about to respond when a new alarm sounded, lights flashing around the chamber. The alien moved quickly to a control panel, her fingers dancing across its surface. They have found us, she said, her skin now pulsing with rapid patterns of alarm. The Krexar fleet has entered this system. How? Beth asked, moving closer, her fear evident. How could they follow us? They must have captured someone. From the mothership, Mizora said. Extracted the coordinates. They are approaching now. We have perhaps an hour before they reach this facility. What do we do? Roy asked, looking at the massive tree and the countless specimens around them. We can't move. All this we don't need to, Mizora replied. The facility has defenses, but they may not be enough against a full Krexar assault. The decision must be made now. All eyes turned to Susan. She felt the pressure of their gazes, the expectation. What decision was hers to make? She was just a translator thrown into an interstellar conflict she barely understood. What decision, Susan asked, although she suspected she already knew. Whether to activate the seed, Mizora said, or destroy it. Destroy it, Susan repeated, shocked. Both options seemed impossible. Destroying an entire planet's biological heritage seemed unthinkable, a crime against life itself. But activating it, risking Earth's ecosystems, that seemed equally reckless. Why is this my decision? She demanded. Because the seed will respond to you, Mizora said. You carry the genetic key. Without your command, it will neither activate fully nor accept a termination sequence. Susan looked at her human companions, their faces showing the same confusion and uncertainty she felt. How could she make this choice? How could anyone? Beth stepped forward. If these Krexar are coming, she said pragmatically, we need to decide quickly. What happens if we do nothing? If we just leave? The Krexar will take the seed. Mizora said they will destroy it and kill everyone here to ensure no knowledge survives. And if we activate it? Roy asked. What exactly does that mean? The seed will begin its reproductive cycle. Mizora explained. It will release spores, millions of them, each containing the genetic material for a different Mizari species. The spores are designed to seek compatible environments. They would spread throughout this system, eventually reaching Earth. They would take root, grow, adapt, integrate with existing ecosystems. That sounds like an invasion, Carla said, speaking for the first time since entering the chamber. Not invasion, Mizora corrected. Integration. The process would take centuries, gradual, controlled, beneficial to both. Susan wasn't convinced the Mazzari might believe that. But they couldn't know for certain what would happen when their biology mixed with Earth's. And the other option? Susan asked. Destroying it. How would that work? Mazzora's skin darkened with what seemed like reluctance. The facility contains a plasma core, she said. If overloaded, it would incinerate everything here, including the seed. Nothing would survive. Not even its genetic memory. Susan closed her eyes, trying to think. Her mind racing through implications, possibilities, consequences. Either choice seemed impossible, neither seemed right. The truth was this decision shouldn't rest on her shoulders alone. This affected all of Earth, potentially all of humanity. Susan moved with newfound purpose, approaching the tree once more. The brief contact had left her with fragmentary knowledge, images and concepts that didn't fully make sense to her human mind, but enough to understand what needed to be done. The others followed her cautiously, still uncertain. "What are you going to do?" Roy asked. Susan studied the glowing nodules on the branches, each one pulsing with internal light, each containing some portion of the Genesis seed's knowledge and genetic library. These are like backup systems, she explained, seeds of the seed. Each contains a portion of the whole, but in a dormant state they won't activate unless specifically triggered. How do you know this? Beth asked. The tree showed me. Susan said when I touched it. She didn't have a better explanation for the rush of alien knowledge that had flooded her mind. The connection had been brief, overwhelming, but certain concepts had remained clear. Susan reached up toward one of the lower nodules. It detached easily, at her touch falling gently into her palm. The perfect sphere felt warm, alive, its surface shifting with patterns similar to Mazzari skin. "We take some of these," she said. "A manageable number, small enough to transport, secure, and study. But not the entire genetic library. Not enough to risk ecological disaster, and the rest?" Carla asked. Susan looked at the massive tree with regret. "Destroy it," she said. "We can't let the Krexar take it, and we can't risk Mazzora's plan for full activation. It's too dangerous, too unpredictable." Roy nodded in agreement. "But how do we do both?" he asked. "How do we take samples and still trigger the destruction sequence?" Susan turned toward the chamber where Mazzora had gone. "We need her help," she said. "And I think I know how to convince her." They found Mazzora at a control panel monitoring the approaching Krexar fleet. The displays showed multiple vessels closing in on the planetoid. Their designs angular, predatory, utterly unlike the organic flowing lines of Mazzari technology. "They will be here in minutes," Mazzora said without turning, her skin pulsing with urgent patterns. "Have you decided?" Susan stepped forward, holding the glowing seed pod in her palm. "Yes," she said. "We will preserve part of the seed, take samples of the genetic library, but destroy the main tree." Mazzora turned, her large eyes fixing on the nodule in Susan's hand. "Impossible," she said. "The seed cannot be divided. It must be activated whole or destroyed completely. Those were the parameters set by its creators." Susan met the alien's gaze steadily. "I touched the tree," she said. "It communicated with me. These nodules are viable independently. They contain partitioned data sections of the whole. The tree's designers built in this redundancy, deliberately. Mazzora's skin. Patterns shifted rapidly, showing surprise, perhaps disbelief. "How could you know this?" "Because the tree told me," Susan said. "And because it makes sense. Any system this important would have backups, ways to preserve essential information, even if the main repository were lost. The Mazzari would have planned for contingencies." Mazzora was silent for a long moment, her skin continuing to shift through complex patterns Susan couldn't interpret. Finally, she spoke. "You truly are of Mazzari heritage," she said. "Only one with our genetic memory could have understood this." The displays flashed with new warnings. The Krexar ships were entering orbit around the planetoid. "We must act now," Mazzora said. "There is no more time together." They returned to the main Chamber Roy, Beth, and Carla had already collected several more of the seed pods, each glowing with internal light. Susan counted 12 in total, small enough to transport discreetly, each containing some portion of the Mazzari biological heritage. How do we destroy the rest? Roy asked, looking at the massive tree and the countless specimen containers. Mizora moved to a control panel near the chamber entrance. The facility has a plasma core, she explained, used to maintain the environmental systems. It can be overloaded. The resulting reaction would sterilize this entire chamber. Nothing would survive, not even us. Beth pointed out. There is an escape pod, Mizora said. It can reach orbit quickly beyond the range of the plasma reaction. But we must. Hurry. Susan looked at the Genesis seed one last time. The magnificent tree, the biological wonder that contained an entire world's heritage. Part of her ancestry, apparently, though that concept was still too strange to fully accept. She felt an unexpected sense of loss knowing it would soon be destroyed. Mizora worked quickly at the control panel, initiating what Susan assumed was the overload sequence. Warning lights began to flash throughout the chamber. A computerized voice spoke in the Mazzari language, the translators in their ears converting it to English. Plasma core overload initiated. The voice announced containment fields disengaging. Evacuation protocols activated. Critical mass. In 15 minutes, it's done. Mizora said, now we must reach the escape pod. They followed her through a series of corridors moving deeper into the planetoid. The 12 seed pods had been carefully packed into a container Roy now carried, each still glowing faintly through the containment material. The escape pod was smaller than Susan had expected, a simple craft with just enough room for the 5 of them. Its design was less organic than other Mazzari technology, more utilitarian as they secured themselves inside. Mizora activated the launch sequence displays. Lit up, showing the surface of the planetoid and beyond it the approaching Krexar vessels. 3 large ships had taken position around the planetoid, their angular hulls bristling with what appeared to be weapons. Will they detect us? Susan asked as the escape pod rumbled to life. Yes, Mizora admitted, but they are preparing to land assault forces. They will not expect a small craft to launch. Their primary focus will be the facility, the seed. The escape pod shot upward through a narrow launch tube, accelerating rapidly. The force pressed Susan back into her seat, making breathing difficult. The others looked equally uncomfortable. Only Mizora seemed unaffected by the high G-forces. They broke free of the planetoid, entering open space. The displays showed the Krexar ships, now clearly visible, massive vessels that dwarfed their tiny escape pod. One was already launching smaller craft, presumably carrying troops to assault the facility. They haven't noticed us yet, Roy said, watching the displays. With tension evident in his voice, Mizora adjusted their course, sending the pod racing away from the planetoid. We need distance, she said. The plasma reaction will create a significant shockwave. The minutes ticked by in tense silence, all of them watching the displays. The Krexar ships grew smaller as they put distance between themselves and the planetoid. Susan found herself counting the seconds, wondering if the aliens would detect them before the facility was destroyed. A sudden, brilliant flash of light filled the displays. The planetoid seemed to glow from within for a brief moment. Then it simply came apart. A rapidly expanding cloud of debris and energy spreading outward. The Genesis seed and all its specimens destroyed in an instant. Shockwave hit their small craft seconds later, sending it tumbling through space. The inertial system struggled to compensate. Alarms blared. Susan felt herself thrown against her restraints. Pain lanced through her shoulder, but the pod remained intact. Its system stabilizing as the worst of the shockwave passed. The displays showed the Krexar ships had also been caught in the blast. The 2 closest to the planetoid were heavily damaged, drifting without power. The 3rd farther out appeared to have survived with only minor damage. They will pursue us, Mizora said. Once they recover, they will know something escaped. Where can we go? Beth asked. What options do we have? Mizora adjusted their course again. The pod has limited range, she admitted. It cannot reach Earth from here, but there is a Mazzari outpost in a nearby system. We have maintained it secretly for generations. It contains a vessel capable of interstellar travel. How long will it take to reach this outpost? Roy asked. 3 days. Mizora said if we maintain maximum speed, and if the Krexar do not find us first. The container with the seed pods glowed softly in the center of the pod, a reminder of what they had saved and what they had destroyed. Susan felt the weight of that decision, wondering if they had made the right choice. For 3 tense days, the escape pod traveled through space, everyone taking shifts to monitor the systems to watch for signs of pursuit. The Krexar ships had disappeared from their sensors shortly after the destruction of the planetoid, but that didn't mean they were safe. Susan spent much of her time studying the seed pods, trying to understand what they contained. The glowing spheres remained dormant, responding slightly to her touch but revealing nothing of their secrets. On the 3rd day, Mizora announced they were approaching the outpost. The displays showed a small artificial structure orbiting a gas giant, its design similar to the facility on the planetoid but much smaller. No Krexar ships. In the vicinity, Beth observed with evident relief. They docked without incident, the outpost appearing abandoned but functional. Mizora led them through airlocks and corridors to a hangar bay where a single Mizari vessel waited. Larger than their escape pod but still small by interstellar standards, the ship has been maintained, Mizora explained. It has sufficient range to reach Earth, and its stealth systems should prevent Krexar detection. As they prepared the vessel for departure, Susan found herself alone with Mizora for a moment, the others checking supplies or exploring the small craft. Why did you really bring me here? Susan asked the question that had bothered her since learning of her supposed heritage. It wasn't just about the seed. Responding to me was it